Good morning, everyone, or afternoon, depending on where you are in the country or the world. My name is Claire Alloway. I'm a part of the marketing team here at Jobvite. And before we get started with today's incredible panel, I wanted to welcome you and get started with a few housekeeping details. So first off, this is the future of AI in recruiting. It's a panel discussion on artificial intelligence and automation in the world. So yes, we are recording. You will be getting a copy of the recording and the slides by tomorrow morning in your inbox. We will definitely be taking questions at the end of the panel, so please use that chat box in the bottom left-hand corner of your screen. We'll be getting to them at the end, and I'll be moderating throughout. And yeah, we'll be sending over the slides and recording so you can rewatch it, share with colleagues, and what have you. So here are today's three panelists. First off, we have Kiran Snyder, a CEO at Textio, Soman Mondal, CEO at Ideal, and Sujay Rao, VP of Product at Jobvite. We had a last-minute switch out, so Sujay thankfully subbed in for our head of product, Robert Zhao. Thank you, Sujay, and thank you, Kiran and Soman. So before we get started with the actual questions, I just wanted to go over a couple of details because there is so much information out there about AI, about machine learning, and all of that. These are the definitions just to help you, to give you a little context. I won't read them all out because that would take longer, and I'd rather get to the Q&A. But these will just, as you can scan them right now and sift through, read them as you'd like. So to start off with our first question, I'm going to start off and pass it over to Sujay to start us off, and then we'll have any of the panelists chime in as they'd like. But for the first question, what are the advantages of using AI in recruiting, and where specifically in the recruiting process do you think that recruiters can get the most from AI?
Great. Hi, everybody. This is Sujay Rao, VP of Product at Jobvite. And I'm really thrilled to be part of this panel, sitting here with Kiran and Soman to talk about the future of AI in recruiting. So this is a really great time for us, those of us that have been following artificial intelligence and the improvements in technology. I would put it this way: who would have thought artificial intelligence is actually going to humanize the recruiting process, right? So as much as it sounds like an oxymoron, here we are today talking about how AI can actually help you with recruiting, right? So there's many areas where AI can actually help in recruiting. But before I even jump into the use cases, at a very high level, this is how Jobvite looks at AI in recruiting, and I'm sure if you were to read analyst literature and likewise, you would agree with me. So at one level, AI can actually act as your recruiting assistant, right? So this is where you can find this technology help you with doing all of the menial jobs that you have to do on a daily basis. All of the grunt work that you have to do in terms of sifting resumes, scheduling, etc. Right? So that's definitely an area where AI can help you. There's candidate engagement. You will see, I don't want to steal anybody's thunder here. My fellow panelists will talk about, how AI can help with candidate engagement. And then, of course, just the power of the machine, right? So to be able to data mine large volumes of data, to be able to do pattern recognition, to be able to give you deep insights into how are passive candidates and active candidates looking at your recruiting funnel, looking at your own job listings, whether they want to apply or not, or they want to drop off, right? So there are many areas where AI is going to be helping with recruiting. So I did talk about going into a little more detail into a few specific use cases with regards to where in the recruiting process can recruiters get the most from AI. While there's a plethora of use cases, I'm going to focus on just the top three that we think you would get the most impact out of. The first one is, sourcing. You've probably met a candidate somewhere at a campus fair or university fair, or, you've gotten in touch with them somehow. So they're sitting in your talent pool, and you're running some nurture campaigns to keep them warm. That is really an area where AI can help you a lot, right? What if you had, a mechanism, a way to be able to get in touch with those passive candidates and just kind of ping them every once in a while saying, hey, we actually do have a few jobs that we think you might want to take a look at. Are you interested? This could be a simple message over text or, just to get a yes or no to even figure out if your passive candidate pool wants to apply to a job. So that is a clear use case, a clear winner in terms of sourcing. The second one actually is post-apply. This is where, this is now we're talking about the screening phase, right? So again, the use case here is, a candidate has applied to a job, but, just to make sure that, you kept the candidate experience clean and the apply process itself lean and nimble, maybe you didn't have to ask the candidate all the questions you really wanted to get up front, but now's the time for you to deploy a chatbot, or a texting mechanism to be able to go back to these applicants and ask them the next set of questions, right? So are you authorized to work in the United States? You could have complex decision trees, and I'm sure, again, I don't want to steal the thunder of my fellow panelists here, but there's a lot of, leverage you can get from AI and chatbotting to be able to help with your screening activity. And, last but not least, honestly, at this point, we think that's a very strong use case, is this candidate ranking, right? So what if you could deploy artificial intelligence to take a look at your own internal hiring processes, your set of resumes that you're sitting on, right? For example, Jobvite, we have been in this space, in the recruiting space for 10 plus years with more than 65 million applications in our database, and every year we get another 15 million job applications coming in. So if you were to deploy AI in the candidate ranking space, you can actually essentially make your algorithms look at that data and learn as it goes along, right? So it would, of course, start off by looking at the candidate skills, their education history, their work history, their tenure, but more importantly, these are intelligent algorithms that can actually learn on the way and start to learn from the feedback that you are getting from recruiters and hiring managers in terms of which type of candidates they are wanting to push forward in the funnel and which type of candidates they're trying to reject outright. So these are important inputs into the algorithm that will continuously make your your ranking feature more and more robust as you go along. So again, lots of excitement in this space, lots of use cases. I can't wait to see what comes up next.
Can I give a more controversial answer? This is Kieran. The wording of the question is so interesting because I would say if you're a recruiter, there are actually no advantages to quote-unquote using AI in recruiting. In fact, having to think about the underlying technology of the solutions that you're using means that the technology isn't working very well for you. So, of course, all of the solutions you're talking about today, and there are many other great ones, do use AI under the covers, but the advantage doesn't come from using AI. The advantage comes from finding a solution that solves the problem that you have. And so I often think just, putting my product hat on, going to the core issues that recruiters have in their work every day, which is they have a lot of roles to fill. It's not always obvious how to find and win the best candidates, how to identify who they are. It's not always obvious how to communicate with them in a way that they will find compelling. And then, of course, you have to run the process. I always start from not using AI or any other technology, but actually what solution is going to measurably give you better results. So, at Textio, the core of our business is really for anything that you're writing, Textio can tell you who's going to respond, right? Whether that's a job post or candidate email or what have you. And I think staying at the level of the core problem, which is to say, people don't know how to communicate in a way that best represents their brand and culture. Or if I'm looking, I won't speak for Soman, but you're thinking on the sourcing side, people don't always know how to find the best candidates for the role. Find the solution that promises you that your roles will fill 3 weeks faster, or that promises you that 20% more of the candidates you identify will be good enough to actually get hired at your company. But I think for the recruiter, and certainly the recruiting leader, staying at the level of what results is this actually promising me is the right place to engage. Because honestly, if solutions aren't promising you specific and measurable results, it doesn't matter whether they're using AI. And you should be very skeptical of the claims as to whether they're using AI, because the whole point of this technology is that it enables and unlocks those specific and measurable results. So it's just a slightly different take that's a little bit a little less tech-centric. And believe me, I love tech. Like my PhD is in natural language processing. But I think when you think about what recruiters need, it's more like, what are my pain points? How much do I want to improve them? And what solution, whatever tech is used, and it's often AI these days, is going to get me to a measurable result.
And again, this is someone here from Ideal. I think Karen makes a great point. Sujay makes a lot of great points. I really simplify it for our customers, and I think Karen kind of mentioned this. We start with the problem. What problem are you trying to fix? What's the metric? Is it time to fill? Is it a better net promoter score? Like, tell me what the metric is, and then we kind of work backwards. Obviously, AI is hot, and it is used in the underlying technology. But Karen's right. We really start. I think we all do. We start with the real problem. And the way that we get to the solution, it might be AI, it might not be, but in many cases, AI really is driving the solution. But at the end of the day, that might not matter as much as long as you're achieving your goals. So again, a lot of our customers, what advantages do they see using AI? It's allowing them to spend more time with candidates. It's allowing them to spend more time relationship building. That's just the outcome of using AI. And so again, I think both people make great points.
Yeah, that is a great point. And actually a great transition to the next question and talking about identifying the problems that you're trying to solve within your recruiting process. Karen, can you get us started on this next question? How can AI help broaden your reach when it comes to attracting qualified and diverse candidates?
Sure. So I'll talk a lot about language. That's our mainstay in what we do at Textio, right? Textio is an augmented writing platform that is giving you feedback while you're writing to candidates, whether that's directly writing to candidates or writing job posts that a lot of them are going to read. And the truth is that if you're writing on your own, even if you're a great writer, you're kind of guessing as to how somebody might respond on the other end of the line, right? So if I find a candidate and I'm really interested in talking to them, I have to guess a little bit about what might get them excited. Maybe I'm talking about the product vision, or maybe I'm complimenting them on a talk I saw them give, a month ago when I watched it online. Or maybe I'm talking about the great benefits and culture of our environment, but I'm guessing, right? It's the same with job posts. I'm trying to hire a new front-end engineer, and I'm guessing. I'm trying to figure out how much do I talk about vision versus technology? How much do I, share my culture? What, sort of augmented writing, which is a type of AI technology, can really do, and AI broadly, is that it can find patterns in masses of data. So at Textio today, there are 350 million job posts and growing with outcomes attached. So not just the job post text, but actual information about who applied to those jobs. And so, what technology can do that an individual can't do on their own is find patterns across that entire data set so that the next time you're writing, you're not guessing. You're actually using data and suggestions that are given to you while you write. And it's a perfect example of a learning loop. These are taking over enterprise technology right now, not just in HR, where everybody's sort of contributing the outcomes of things they've written, makes the predictions and guidance better for everybody in the system. So it's really a virtuous cycle where I share with you what worked for me, and you share with me what worked for you, and together we both do better. So I think it's just the ability to collect and dissect and really find the patterns that are working at a broad scale, not just in my own experience where I'm working, on my own LinkedIn account on my own computer, but actually using millions of others' experiences to make me better.
If I may jump in, yeah, that was a great answer from Kieran. Again, Sujay here. So there's two ways to look at this. One is what can you do on the front end in terms of broadening your reach. Front end as in how do you make your job listings appear more diverse and more accommodating, right? On the back end, is where all of the metrics and the measurements and the bias detection comes into play, right? So one of the things that we have prototyped at Jobvite, is to kind of look at, prepare a bias detection report. It sounds ominous, but it really isn't, right? So if you were to look at, say, a sales engineer position or a product management position, how many candidates applied, and how many of them progressed through the funnel, and if you were to do a demographic breakdown in terms of gender or ethnicity, who actually went farther, who did not, to be able to learn as you go along, or rather, as you have to let your algorithms learn as you go along, and then try to feed that back into your front so that, you could now start to figure out what do I need to tweak on our job listing pages and our outreach efforts to be able to get the right mix. So if you were to combine these two together, I think you'll be in a really good place.
Soman, did you have anything to add to that question?
Oh, no.
Cool. So moving from the sourcing and the discovery of candidates and broadening that pool, I want to move on to the use of chatbots and explicitly how it can improve the candidate experience. So I think, Soman, you'd be the perfect person to start us off, given your work at Ideal.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much. So, I kind of like to look at it from really simple examples. So I'm going to walk through how one of our customers kind of used to do things and how they're doing things now. So it's very common. It's a big financial institution. And so they had a very long application process. So I think everyone's familiar with this. They would have a website. Someone would go to apply. First step is they need to answer 5 questions about themselves, name, email address, and then from there it's upload your resume. And then from there, they'd have to answer about 10 screening questions, whatever they are, they'd have to ask those. So we're now kind of at the 3 to 6 minute mark in the application process. And then from there, they'd have to do an assessment. And then some of our customers even had to do a video interview. And then from there, their application is complete. It could have taken anywhere from 6 to 15 minutes, in some cases even longer. And at that point, you've kind of gone from the candidate experience, and I like to try to bring this all the time, then we kind of go to the recruiter experience. And now that applicant is kind of in candidate limbo or candidate black hole. They're waiting to hear back from somebody. And so now we're going to our recruiters who in many cases have too many applications to go through. And so now, it can take anywhere from 1 day on the short end, very short end side of things, to weeks for a recruiter to look at an application, figure or not whether or not that person should be brought to the next step, which is typically an in-person interview. So that's kind of a typical workflow of how things are done now. So let's kind of fast forward and see how that exact workflow can be improved using chatbots. And again, the overall theme, I think we can all agree on, all the speakers, is that we're trying to give recruiters more time to be more human, more time to speak to candidates. So let's look at how this workflow would have changed with the chatbot. So we have the same person. Now they're entering in basic information. So what's your first name, last name, and what's your phone number or email? From there, they can either upload their resume or a chatbot can ask them immediately. So once we have that initial piece of information, a chatbot can jump in and tell them, hey, I just got your resume. So they've uploaded their resume and I've looked it over. So keep in mind the chatbots are not just always conversational. They have the ability to also kind of dig into screening data. So the chatbot immediately reviews the resume based on what's worked in the past, is able to say, you know what, we should bring this person to the next step. Let's ask them additional questions. So the main problem with the original way of the candidate workflow is that everything is linear. You have to ask one question and then another and then another and then another. If someone isn't an immediate fit for that position from step one, why are we asking them 10 more questions? We should stop the application process right there, and we should be smart about it. If someone's resume says they can work on the weekends, well, we shouldn't really ask them that question in a screening question. So going ahead to how this works now, someone submits their resume. The bot reads the resume, checks whether or not this person's a good fit or not, and then immediately asks additional questions. So they might receive a text that says, hey, thanks for applying to that position. We really think you're a good fit based on what your resume says. I need to ask you a couple more questions. And then the questions are progressively asked. So what does that mean when I say it's progressively asked? So if there's one question that they're not a good fit for, they're not going to continually ask additional questions. If they can't work on the weekends and we ask that question, and they can't work on the weekends, then we don't ask them any more questions because the process is essentially over from there. Now, why is this done? Chatbots allow us to reduce the amount of questions and ask questions in a more kind of human-friendly way. So we went from asking many questions over web-based forms to asking as few questions as possible to get to a much more intelligent result. So the way, again, chatbots work, again, they'll ask questions that are needed, and they'll take the answers and feed that back into an overall score, teeing that candidate up for an interview. And then the final step is being able to schedule that interview with the chatbot completely automatically. So from a recruiter's perspective, they now have a screened candidate that is being engaged and that they can either have an interview scheduled for them, or they can immediately get on the phone and call that candidate because they're a great fit. So they no longer have to go through a bunch of thousands of candidates. They just really focus on the ones that are a great fit. From a candidate point of view, how does this improve their experience? Well, they went from answering 1,000 questions, or maybe that's an extreme exaggeration. Let's say they went from a 10-minute process now to a 60-second process. If they're not a good fit for a specific job, we've cut down the process, made sure that they finish the application as quickly as possible, and they might be a good fit for another position. So Sujay kind of mentioned this in the beginning. We can go through our talent networks and pick out past candidates. Well, you can't do that if they dropped off right away from the beginning. So chatbots ensure that we have as many people that complete the application. We have the shortest amount of time taken during that application, and the questions are intelligent. They're not asking repeat questions. They're asking relevant questions. And again, this makes the whole process quicker, easier, and I'd argue a little and more fun for the applicant.
Great, Somin. So let me just jump in and add my own thoughts here. So that was a great answer to how can it improve candidate experience. I'm going to spend a couple minutes on why. Why should you rely on a chatbot to improve candidate experience, right? Isn't that the job of the recruiter? Right, so our stats show us that over the past, I would say even the last 8 to 10 years, the volume of applicants that's coming in has skyrocketed, right? So, and let's just face it, the size of the recruiting teams, is not increasing. You're more or less, your headcount is stagnant within the recruiting teams, yet you're having to deal with this large influx of applications. And one of the basic tenets of a good recruiting experience candidate experience is to be timely, responsive, being able to get in touch with the candidates on a regular basis or as quickly as possible. And I think that's really where kind of Soumen's answer ties in really nicely is, honestly, let's face it, you just don't have the time to be able to get in touch with every candidate at the right touch points in the life cycle to be able to tell them how things are progressing. And that is the number one pet peeve of all candidates is 30 to 60% of candidates never ever hear back after they've applied to a job. And that is just bad candidate experience. And I think, chatbots and AI can certainly help move the ball forward there.
Wonderful. Karen, did you want to jump in, or I can move on to the next question?
I'm happy to start with the next question.
Okay, wonderful. And I think this is right up your alley. You were talking about it before. What results and metrics have customers improved upon using AI, and how do you measure its effect on your applicant pipeline? And I think actually I had Soumen you starting us off, but I'm sure everyone on the panel will have a good amount to say on this topic.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you again. So yeah, I'm gonna focus on a couple of high-level metrics that I know our customers really focus on. So from a business kind of decision-making side, we look at time to fill. A lot of our customers look at time to fill, and so that's a key metric that, especially in a lot of our retail environments, high volume, as Sujay was saying, when you're receiving thousands of applications, time to fill. So when using new AI tools, we found our customers were, in some cases, able to reduce time to fill from 34 days to 9 days, and that would be a 70% improvement. And how do they do that? Well, a lot of our customers spend weeks in the screening phase. They have one level of screening, 2 levels of screening, and literally that can take up a majority of the time. So, if you're able to improve your time to fill anywhere from, at the high end being 70% to about 25%, that's kind of the results that some customers are seeing in that range. The other metric that our customers focus on, and this is really tied to candidate experience, is the drop-off rate. Our customers on average before see a drop-off rate of about 60%. These are the people that just do not finish their application. So great candidates who slip through the cracks. And when they employ technology such as chatbots, they see an improvement of almost 50% all the time. This is not just, if you look at other industries such as lead forms for sales, sales and marketing, the same kind of metrics can be found as well. So in talent, we're just kind of finding the same conclusions that long forms don't necessarily mean the best for drop-off rates and the candidate experience. So an improvement of 50% is quite common to see in improving drop-off rates. And some other metrics that aren't as well known that our customers really look at is screen rate. These are and Sujay was talking about this, how many candidates do you actually look at? Do you actually review? And it's shocking if you actually look through your ATS and look at all of the candidates that have never been viewed, that have never been touched, that have never been contacted. On average, we'd say most customers can really only get through 30% of their candidates. The range we see is 6 to 30%. That means the rest of them are completely ignored. And so using the metrics that people want to see is 100%. They want to go from 30% to 100% so they can at least build rules and automation to address candidates that are never contacted. And then the final metric that we really look at from a efficiency standpoint is interview to hire ratio. You know, in your kind of best case scenario, you'd want to interview to hire ratio to be 1-to-1, because if it's not, that means you're interviewing people that clearly aren't a good fit. Oh, you know, in a dream scenario, it'd be 1-to-1. So we've seen great improvements on interview to hire ratio. Some of the more interesting facts are sometimes people are interviewing candidates literally by going back to the last 10 people that have applied, searching chronologically, picking those people, and bringing them into interviews. That's the extreme case, and in those cases, they can see a 40% improvement they ignore 40% of the interviews that they were never supposed to do. So again, at a high level, time to fill, drop-off rate, screen rate, and interview to hire ratio are some of the metrics that we see people focusing on.
I can comment on that also. So Soman did a good job of walking through what a lot of recruiting teams focus on. And obviously, time to fill is a very common metric. Things like interview to hire ratio or apply to interview ratio also end up being pretty interesting. Of course, it all starts with what you measure. So, you know, for us, again, as people are writing their job posts, it's pretty typical. We just did some work with NVIDIA to assess how they've done at Textio over the last year, for instance. It's pretty typical that when they get to kind of the minimum score on their job posts as they're writing them in Textio, the jobs are filling in about half the time. Okay, and if you think about, you know, the average corporate role takes about 60 days to fill, half the time is a substantial savings, not just an effort for your team, but actually it's an accelerator for your business. And this is, you know, not an independent metric. So you fill jobs faster, it turns out, when you attract more qualified people. So you often see that kind of reduction in time to fill correlate with some other things, like a 30 to 50% increase in the number of people applying who are qualified enough to interview. Again, you find that qualified person faster, of course you'll fill the role more quickly. It turns out that gender-neutral jobs fill 2 to 3 weeks faster than biased jobs, right? Jobs where the language statistically attracts an even balance across genders versus just attracting one type of gender. And not an accident. Again, you reach the entire population, you find someone qualified faster. In fact, Johnson & Johnson is another customer of ours, who's been a customer for a while, found that they attracted 90,000 more women into their candidate pipeline last year in optimizing their jobs to be high scoring and gender neutral. And that drove a significantly faster time to fill as well. So a lot of times you see these metrics working together. And so that's a really important piece of this, is that just focusing on one metric, you may be very clear on what matters to you, but a lot of times you see them working as a system. And it all starts with what you're measuring in the first place. So I would say our customers, other than time to fill, are not super consistent across one another with the metrics they care most about. Some do focus on time to fill. Some, you know, for higher turnover jobs, they focus on pure applicant count. So CVS, the pharmacy, has corporate roles, and they also have retail pharmacy roles. And for the retail pharmacy roles, applicant count's really important because those are high turnover roles. Well, for the corporate roles, applicant count isn't interesting. In fact, many companies for corporate roles would like a lower applicant count with a higher proportion of qualified people who can interview, because they don't want to spend all the time. Maybe they're not using Ideal yet, but they don't want to spend all the time wading through those various applicants of people who might not be qualified. So, but the key thing here, and this is, it's a theme for me through the day, that anytime you're going to use one of these solutions, ours or anybody else's, is you should always ask with referenceable customers, what measurable result have you gotten, and what's going to happen given my starting point. So the customers, and I'd say HR and talent teams are increasingly metric savvy. A couple of our customers we know have their people analytics teams running Data Science 101 courses for their entire HR and talent organization just to introduce them to basic data concepts. And then that's on the job post side. On the recruiting email side, so you're writing to candidates, the metrics that people care about the most are response rate and sentiment of that response. So kind of our Textio Hire product, where recruiting mail is part of the mix, Johnson & Johnson and Zillow, who were the first customers out of the gate using it, measured between a 20 and 25% increase in response rate based on the way they crafted those mails, again, using data and augmented writing to help. So, for us, it's time to hire, it's qualification level, it's response rate, and sometimes it's the diversity of the candidate pool.
Yes, I wanted to chime in as well. I think Kieran and Soman, honestly, they covered, the majority of the metrics. One insight that we have been seeing here at Jobvite is some of our customers are thinking about deploying chatbots to help candidates even assess if they want to apply for a job, right? So the use case is candidate, I go to the career listing page, and there's a chatbot there where I can type in a question. So for example, hey, what does the interview process really look like at your company? And then the chatbot gives me some answers. That kind of helps me figure out if I even want to apply. For example, this could be a 3 to 6 month interview process, in which case I might not want to apply, right? Or other examples like what's your benefits being provided at this company. Sure, a lot of this information is either hidden away or provided on other pages of the website, on the career website, but we are starting to see a tracking of candidate engagement, NPS, Net Promoter Score, right? So with the million-dollar question being, would you refer another friend to apply for one of our open positions, right? So that kind of tells you how good you're structuring your pre-apply as well as your post-apply processes. So that's another area that is starting to show a lot of promise with chatbots and NPS.
Wonderful. So we've got one last question before we get to the Q&A, and it is, what should heads of TA and HR be on the lookout for before investing in AI for recruiting? I'm going to start off with Kieran. Can you get us started on this one?
Yeah, and I know this is such a timely question because if you've built your career in talent acquisition or HR, you probably aren't deep in the set of technologies that are, that comprise AI. I'm sure that's part of why several of you came to this webinar today. And the reality is, if you're going to HR Tech or a similar event and you walk the showroom floor, you will see certainly more than 90% of vendors there talking about using AI in their solution. So I think it can be very hard to tell kind of what's a real diamond for you and what might just be noise, because I do think a lot of people talk about using AI because it's kind of a buzzword. I saw someone in the comment that they observed this before, and I agree with that. So a couple of things that I would say you want to be on the lookout for. So in fact, it's a lot more interesting if people are using AI but not talking about it. If they're talking instead in terms of the results that they're going to give you, to the discussion all three of us just commented on in the last question. So concretely, what are they going to do to the metrics you care about, whether that's response rate or time to fill or diversity or whatever it may be? Ask vendors to get really specific on the results that they get, and ask for customer case studies, right? Ask to see what other customers are accomplishing in the space, because that will tell you very quickly whether it's a solution that might solve a problem you would have. So that's the first thing that I always think about. The second thing, and this is a little more nuanced and harder, maybe a little harder to assess, but solutions that are built with these technologies from the beginning, as opposed to solutions that sort of bolt them on after the fact, simply work better. So if a solution is built with the kind of data feedback loop that you need to sustain learning technology from the beginning, that solution is going to develop faster, it's going to learn faster. When a data feedback loop is part of the design from the get-go, then the potential for machine learning or artificial intelligence or related technologies to find patterns in the data is much greater. So it makes sense, right? Like you have to collect the data in order to find patterns within it. If you don't have the data, then you have nothing to operate on to find the patterns. And so solutions that have been in market a much longer time, maybe that were really wonderful and they were conceived before the dawn of AI, and data collection is kind of the way you build things, just have a harder time catching up because they've built a user experience and a back end around mostly workflow, not around data collection. And so that's the second big element that I often advise people to look for. And then the third thing that I think is really, really important, and this will be the last thing, three is about what I think you can remember usefully, is that when you're walking that showroom floor at these events, it's really important to ask yourself, how is the solution I'm seeing right now different from everything else on the showroom floor? Right? Are there 20 clones, right, that make it actually pretty hard to pick between them because they're all solving the same problem in sort of an incremental way? Maybe one of them is great for your problem, and then you really should lean in on what specific and measurable results they promise. But it's much harder to get the relationship of the purchase choice you're going to make, because let's be honest, like the word in this question is investing in AI. You're putting dollars to work. You're spending money from a limited budget on these solutions. So the third question I always ask is this solving a problem I have in a different way? Is this different from the other things I'm seeing? Is this going to place me at the forefront of my competitors? Am I going to have access to a kind of solution that they may not be using effectively yet? That's always a good indication, if it solves the problem you have, that you have a chance to get a real competitive hiring advantage by using something that's relevant and interesting maybe before your talent competitors are. So those are the three. Specific measurable results. Was it built with AI from the beginning? And is it interestingly and meaningfully different from other players in the space? Those are the guidelines I tend to give our customers when they ask about other solutions.
Soman, do you have any advice for heads of TA?
No, and so Karen made a ton of great points. I can't really add so much to that. But I mean, again, I'm going to reiterate. When we talk to people, and Karen's right, there's a ton of noise out there. There's a ton of different applications. So when we tell customers, this is what I would do if I were you. Number one, start with the business problem. I think we've all kind of established that. Starting with the business problem is the most important thing. So let's assume that there's a business problem that needs to be solved. Step number two, talk to customers. I mean, case studies are great. I would go a step further and actually talk to customers. When you're at the proper kind of process in your sales cycle or in your purchasing cycle, talk to real-world equivalent customers. So, if your customer, if you know someone that's using Jobvite with this product, talk to them. So customers that are in the exact same boat, same ATS, same problem, I would kind of find those specific type of customers. And then the other two suggestions I have that I think really start separating all the noise out there into the kind of the real world companies, apart from actual customers and good references, is integration and security. You'd be surprised at how many companies look great on paper, but when it comes down to deploying into an enterprise environment where there's IT involved, there's security policies involved, there's IT audits involved, there's penetration tests involved, like all of these things that IT need to take care of, ask the vendor, have you gone through this before? Are you in compliance with certain regulations? What other companies at scale have you worked with? You'd be surprised at how many companies don't have the integration capability. Again, you want your whatever kind of tools that you purchase to be able to integrate well into whatever infrastructure you already have. So integration and then security. Does a vendor store personally identifiable information? Is that allowed by your company? If not, then you're already going down the wrong path. So again, starting with the business problem, looking at customers, looking at integration, and then looking at the security capabilities are all factors that I would look into, before making an investment in anything really.
Great. So I am going to move into the Q&A section of our presentation. We've already had a number of different questions being chatted to us, so thank you to everyone who's done that. But obviously we have about 15 minutes to go through these questions, so please feel free to share and to type those in, and we'll get to as many as possible. So to start off, I'm going to start with a question from Tanner, and he asks Kieran explicitly, I hear many people say they're unsatisfied with their job descriptions, but aren't willing to invest the time to improve them. Why do you think that is, and how do you think AI can help these people?
Well, first of all, I agree with the observation. I have yet to talk to a company whose recruiters or talent leaders or hiring managers tell me how awesome all their job descriptions are. I would say that there is a high level of dissatisfaction with the product, the job description that gets produced here, which is actually a pretty rough prioritization, because as a product, text in general and job descriptions in particular advertise your brand and culture more than just about anything else you do. So let's start with, I agree with the observation. I think that the degree to which companies are willing to put time into improving them maps very much to two things. First, who's responsible for it? Is it the recruiter or is it the hiring manager? So there are companies where hiring managers take the lead on writing the job descriptions that turn into public job posts. And then there are companies where the recruiters have the ultimate responsibility there. And in general, companies where recruiters have the ultimate responsibility do feel more accountable for getting good job descriptions out the door. But unfortunately, they have many fewer resources to get it done, because for every recruiter, there's 20 hiring managers that they're supporting, and you put the pressure there on the recruiter as the bottleneck is really, really hard for people that are that are already very busy. The second axis that often makes a difference is the company's willingness to embrace technology to help. And there's a reason that at Textio we're augmented writing and not purely automated writing, because we do understand that your own brand voice and point of view on the job requirements and description are really, really important. And in fact, you don't want to sound like every other job in the market. If you did, no one would perform very well. So I do think to the extent that companies are willing to embrace technology that assists in the writing process and makes it faster. I mean, our customers on average take between 8 and 10 minutes to write a job post. It's not actually that much time. In fact, it's probably the amount of time you're spending without software helping you. In fact, typically you're spending about twice as much time if you're writing them without software helping you. You just really have to be able to demonstrate that using technology not only gets you a better measurable result, gets you those faster time to fill or the additional candidates that are more diverse into your pipeline, but it actually saves you time. If you're starting from a job that is already known to perform really well, right, you're using your job library and you know that this one, if you published it today in the market, would perform at the 95th percentile of the market, well, that's a really good foundation because then you just have to tweak it a little and it saves you enormous time rather than taking something from 5 years ago that you no longer know how it works. But I agree with the core observation. Companies that are forward-looking and measurement-oriented and technology-embracing have a real advantage here.
Great. So next I'm going to switch over to, we have a couple of questions about chatbots, so I'm going to start off with some on these guys. So first, Kelly asks the question, are chatbots found out? And if they are, do you find that this disengages with the applicant?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So the first thing that we tell people is that you don't want to try to trick people. Like you don't want them to, you don't want to trick people into thinking that you're dealing with a real life human. Although in many cases you actually say, oh, this is actually a chatbot or this is a automated messaging. I think the first thing to do is to be transparent, and we found that most candidates actually don't mind at all. We've actually done research and surveys about this very topic. We recently put out a video with actual feedback from candidates, and they were more than happy to engage with a chatbot, knowing that their application would be viewed, screened quicker. So, are they disengaging? I would say absolutely not, as long as you're transparent with your candidate.
And then another question from Ankit: How much is AI really working inside of a chatbot? Or is it just a filtering bot and using some kind of if-else or if-then logic?
So that's a good question, more on the technical side. So I would say, for a chatbot to understand the answers, you're right. You probably could write a million if statements that say, if response is this, if response. That's not exactly how it works. So it is true AI, and at least in what we do, in what we found most companies probably do, it's being able to understand the answers and then acting on those answers. Now, you might be able to develop workflows based on the understanding and the context of the answer, and those could be kind of laid out. So like the system doesn't automatically figure out what to do next. You might tell it what to do, but understanding of the answers, that's true AI there. It would be very difficult to do that another way. But as Karen mentioned, there might have been technology companies 10 years ago, maybe in customer support, that might have started off not using pure AI, and they might have built a rules-based engine that could essentially bring out the same results, might not have all the corner cases. But in our case, and I think all the newer technologies that are coming out, it is a true implementation of certain aspects of AI.
Wonderful. I'm going to move on to a question from Miranda that I think any of our panelists would have a wonderful answer for. So are HR tools that are leveraging AI sufficiently considering how algorithms may inadvertently discriminate against protected categories of applicants? How can I be sure I'm in compliance with the law if I use these tools?
Yeah, so I can start with that one. I think it's a really good consideration. Especially we've experienced this. Our customers often care about getting broader, more inclusive, more diverse hiring, and they want to make sure they're not being discriminatory in how they hire. And so in Textio, a really key part of this is that you're in charge of who you want to reach. Textio can give you information about whether one group or another group is likely to engage with you, but you have to make a very informed decision about the groups you're trying to reach. We generally advise people that staying demographically neutral is the best place to be because you reach the broadest group, you fill roles faster. But sometimes we do have customers who make different choices. So this is particularly common in the technology space where maybe people want to bring a lot of women or people of color into their engineering team because they feel like it's not very diverse. And so the onus is still on you as an organization to make legal and ethical choices, just as it is if you don't use these technologies. You have to figure out who you source and who you interview and how to make sure that your entire end-to-end hiring process isn't discriminatory in some way. I think what technology like this can enable you to do is make more informed choices so that, again, you're not guessing, you're not accidentally discriminating against certain groups without meaning to. But I think the onus is always still on the business to be really thoughtful and accountable about who they're trying to reach and consider these technologies another data source that helps ensure that you're more fair in how you run that process.
Wonderful. So next we have a question from Ted. How can AI help you get to passive candidates? Maybe if Soman, maybe you have something to start us off with on that one.
Absolutely. So the way to look at this, absolutely. The way to look at this is, so at Ideal, we do have sourcing capabilities, and I like to relate it to some of our other capabilities. So, we are able to screen candidates. We're able to look at a mass amount of data, learn from the past, and figure out who should be brought in for an interview. With that same technology, we can actually connect to third-party databases. So think of CareerBuilder, think of your own talent network, think of other job sites, and we can, typically there's you can buy credits to these websites and you can get programmatic access. So our system allows you to go to those third-party databases as well as your own talent network and go through each candidate, read the resume, and then the system will decide whether or not to reach out to that candidate with the chat technology. So that is one method of reaching passive candidates. Now, before I know someone's already asked about LinkedIn. This method of reaching passive candidates only exists if, essentially if the job board lets you do that. So there, Dice.com, CareerBuilder, all of those websites do, but LinkedIn does not. So LinkedIn, as of this date, as far as I know, they do not allow third parties access to their system. They don't allow the automation of anything. You literally have to buy a LinkedIn Recruiter license and use it. And you know what? That's great. That's their business model. And it does preclude any kind of third parties coming in and doing anything automatically.
Yeah, I would say, from our perspective on passive sourcing, Textio has an offering that we're just bringing to market now that specifically applies to your passive sourcing candidate outreach, whether you're doing that in LinkedIn or Gmail or what have you. So it's nice to be able to apply some of that same learning technology to passive candidates. And again, figuring out, you don't have to guess what they're likely to care about, because I do think the passive, we started out in job posts, probably what many of you know us for, but I do think the passive side of communication is really important with candidates as well. And again, if you're trying to have a communication platform that works anywhere you're writing to say how people will respond, you can't just use broadcast job posts as an example. You really need to be able to get one-to-one as well. So I agree with that. That's an important focus and a huge development focus for us right now.
Wonderful. So we're getting very close to the top of the hour, and I want to be cognizant of everyone's time. So I'm going to finish up here. But thank you to everyone who joined us, and thank you specifically to our panelists, Karen Soman and Sujay. It was really great engaging conversation, and I thank you guys for all of your joining us today. So like I said at the top of the presentation, everyone will be receiving the slides as well as the recording so that you can watch it again, share it with colleagues, or anything along those lines. And we did have a couple of questions. from participants asking for demos of our products, which is always lovely to see. So just a note, everyone will get follow-up information from our vendors or from our partners today, so you can ask any of those questions or see any of the products if we've piqued your interest. So thank you again, everyone, and hope everyone has a wonderful rest of their day. Bye.